Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we're continuing along with Lookout on Parenting here, the survival guide for the single parent, written by my friend Ted Moss III. Continuing on with part 2, and specifically chapter 2 of part 2, getting through the day. And today we're going to talk about soups on, how to get some decent food into your kids for breakfast. Let's just get right into it. Last time, if you guys remember, talked about chapter 1 of part 2, which kids ready for the day. Getting your kids ready to hop up out of bed and tackle whatever you got going on that day. A couple of the points that Ted talked about in this chapter was knowing your customer and realizing that if you have multiple kids, and even if you have just one kid, their particular personality is going to dictate how they wake up in the morning. So Ted talked about how, and he's had multiple kids, how some of his kids would wake, they would be up and ready, like a middle-aged man on coffee. They were just up, they were ready, they had the newspaper, they were already sitting down, they were up before you. You guys get the point. But then other kids took a long time to get ready. Other kids, like me, I remember when I was little, I did not want to wake up. I wanted to stay in the warm, cozy bed. And you have to kind of realize that all kids are going to be different. You have to realize that you're waking up a kid from that comfort. There's going to be some pushback. There's going to be some maybe aggressiveness on the part of the kid. So just kind of know what you're dealing with before you go into it and have a plan. That's the next bullet point that we're going to talk about, having a plan. So basically, what can you do if you know that you have to wake up early in the morning and you have to be out of the door by a certain time? What can you do the night before? What can you do the morning before your kids wake up? And what can you do the morning after your kids wake up? Realizing that anything done after your kids wake up is probably the worst time, and you're not going to be able to get a ton done in that time. It's not going to go exactly as planned. So Ted advocated, you split up your plan into these 3 components and try to do as much as you can the night before. Try to do as much as you can before your kids wake up. That's when you'll have the most focus. That's when you'll have the most time and you can better prepare that way. And then leave as little as possible for after your kids wake up. Operate on kid time. So you have to realize, Ted talks about, and I think we've mentioned this too in the Teddy's Tips, how kids are so present focused. They don't really have a concept. Some kids don't have a concept of future and past, and they don't realize that there's obligations and responsibilities. Now, the adults realize this. That's why they're trying to get out the door by a certain time. So you kind of have to respect the time that kids operate on, which is, hey, very scatterbrained, very present-minded, and you kind of have to go with the flow a little bit, so to speak. And yes, you still want your kids out the door. I mean, don't get me wrong here, but any sort of force is not going to go well. You're better off trying to just help your kids along. Try to get the task done, but do it. Try to enlist the kids' help in it, because if it's the kids' idea, then they're more likely to go along with it. Reminds me of the movie Inception, right? If it's somebody's own idea, then they love it. So how can you operate on your kids' time? How can you get them to love the idea of waking up early to go to this certain function that you need to go to? And lastly, accept the unexpected. Hey, everybody's got to play until they get punched in the mouth. You kind of have to roll with the punches, and you have to just accept that things aren't always going to go as planned. And Ted lays out 3 points here. You accept the current situation as it is. If you can't, then you try to change it. Decide if you can live with it being the way that it is, and if you can't, then change it. And life is 90% what happens, 10% what happens to you, and 90% how you react to it. It's not that you got screwed, it's how you reacted to the screwing, as Ted talks about in one story. So that's how you get your kids ready for the day. But before you get out the door, there's something that needs to be addressed, something that you still need to do. And yes, there's people out there that do intermittent fasting like me. I don't eat a breakfast. But for your kids, when I was a kid, breakfast was super important. Oh, if I skipped breakfast, I would be not a happy camper if I did not get my bowl of Fruit Loops or Frosted Flakes. So how do you get decent food into your kids for breakfast? Well, Ted lays out the plan here in this chapter. And first, much kind of like the previous chapter, and with a lot of things with kids, is you just want to be prepared. Breakfast time is not a time to be spontaneous, Ted talks about here. Make sure that you have everything ready to go. Make sure the dishes are clean. Make sure you have all the right foods to make a balanced breakfast. You don't want to be scrambling the morning of when time is restricted as it is. You know, maybe you have your kids got to wake up. They got to go to school. They got to get there by a certain time. You don't want to be running around like a chicken with your head cut off the morning of trying to make bacon and eggs, and you don't have bacon and eggs, right? Ted talks about here, you got to entice the kids. Again, it's better if they have the idea of waking up, and they're more likely to wake up if there's a certain incentive to it. So Ted advocated here to let your kids know what they're waking up for. Have their favorite food ready, and hopefully it's a food that's relatively healthy, but that'll entice your kids to want to get out of bed. Hey, we've got bagels and cream cheese. Oh, that's your son's favorite breakfast meal. Well, he's probably going to mosey on out of his bedroom at a decent hour if you have a bagel and cream cheese. But here's the thing. Make sure you have it. And you always want to keep your word. Again, look at this. It kind of ties back to 4 agreements again here and being impeccable with your word. Keep your word. If you say you have something, then you better have it. Because conviction and believability, Ted says, is super important for your parents. Your kids need to see that you do what you mean and you mean what you say. Say what you mean and you mean what you say. Sorry. So that's all about being prepared. Next step. Give limited choices. And Ted talks about here, we also mentioned this in one of Teddy's tips. Do you guys remember when we were talking about how kids can give you their perspective on the world? And that is a very open-ended, infinite loop, right? We're talking about coding, infinite loop that you're going on when you just kind of let your kids give you their worldview, or it can be. So the biggest mistake that you can make at breakfast time is asking open-ended questions. Hey, Jimmy, what do you want for breakfast? Now you're just asking for a can of worms, because the ever deepening imagination of your child is going to throw out some breakfast food, and it might not even be a breakfast food, right? Now I want pizza for breakfast. Well, we don't have pizza. Well, now your kid, your son or daughter is not going to be a happy camper. Don't let them dictate that. If you don't know what the answer is going to be, don't ask the question, Ted says. It's important to remember here, you're not a short order cook. You don't want to ask this open-ended question at breakfast time, so you want to give some limited healthy choices here, right? And Ted talks about this from a sales perspective, and he's told me this before in person too, promising the world but under-delivering. What you want to do is under-promise, over-deliver. And you got to remember that there's residual effects of over-promising and under-delivering. Makes it kind of decreases the chances of you doing business with that person in the future. So, how do you ask your kid what they want at breakfast time? Well, do you want A or B? I have A or B. I have a sesame seed bagel or I have eggs. Which, do you want a sesame seed bagel or eggs? Boom. Right? And it maybe doesn't have to be 2 choices, but like 2 or 3 choices, healthy choices, hopefully something that your kids like. Now, what do you do if your kid doesn't like it? Well, we're going to talk about that in a second here. But you want to have a ritual at breakfast time, consistency and structure. We talked about this in Teddy's tips about how you want to be consistent as a parent and how you give punishment. So if you do something in public or in private, be ready to do something in public too. But you need to create structure for your kids. So, have a ritual at breakfast time. What's the ritual? Well, and maybe this in not necessarily at breakfast time, but at every meal, coats and shoes off, hands are washed, toys are left in the other room, devices, electronics left in the other room. You have assigned seating, and we eat at a certain time of the day. And make sure that the bibs are on if your kids are like at that age, bibs are on, and water, you got water or milk in the sippy cup, and you're ready to go. Right? Have that ritual, have that consistency, and it's going to start to be ingrained in your kids. Maybe it might be difficult at first, but in time it'll be ingrained. And now you reward performance. This is the next phase. Rewarding performance for when they finish their meals, when they take that bite out of something. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink it. So how do you make your toddler eat something? So let's say, at breakfast time or whatever meal it is, they don't like a particular food or it's a new food, right? Allowing your child a choice increases their chances of eating, obviously. If they're going to pick their favorite food, they're probably going to eat their favorite food, right? But what if they don't choose a food? What if it's like broccoli, which I hated as a kid, but now I love broccoli. I'm actually having that for dinner tonight. What do you do? So Ted advocates here for offer a celebratory great job when they take a first bite. Make it something that's very meaningful. Your kids, I think, would appreciate that from you. Give them an incentive, reward that performance of taking a first bite of a food they have never tried before. But what if they don't take a first bite? Well, Ted has a couple things to kind of try out here. And the first thing is, you want to see if the food is within their taste range. So what does he mean by that? Well, like I said, I hated broccoli as a kid, love it now. And I actually think there have been studies that have talked about how kids have a different palate than adults. That's why kids are so attracted to candy sweets, and adults are too, But kids don't have that same attraction affinity for dark leafy greens, vegetables, salads. They want the bread, they want the cake. At least, I mean, I can speak from experience on that. But I think it's because their palates are different as a kid than as an adult. So if the food isn't within their taste range, what can you do to get it within their taste range? Well, I guess you can add stuff to it, or you can find something else that hopefully is just as nutritious and maybe make a substitute, or they don't have to eat the whole thing, but maybe just like a little bite of it. But I know that's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge. Now, Ted also says here, don't frame the offer as a replacement for a food which they prefer. So you're not, this broccoli is not replacing. This broccoli is not. Make sure that you are not framing the offer as a replacement for a food which they prefer. So if they prefer bread, cake, and ice cream, this isn't a replacement for that. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Attach a clear and immediate reward for just one bite. The better the reward, the more cooperation you are going to get. Okay, that seems pretty fair. If they take one bite, hey, it's not just a great job, but hey, you get to watch 30 minutes of your favorite TV show. Something like that, maybe. Now, in order to entice them even more, to show them that you are legit in this reward, have somebody else receive the reward for taking a first bite. So that way they can see you're serious about it. And a reward shouldn't be an imbalanced food. So for taking a bite of broccoli, you shouldn't reward candy because now that kind of offsets the benefits of the broccoli. Reward for an additional bite of new food after they have consumed the entire rest of the meal. So they have to finish the whole meal and then reward them for that food that they are hesitant to try. And don't let them tell you that they are too full. They're not full. They're kids. I could eat a whole box of cereal. I'm pretty sure I could eat a whole box of cereal now too, but they're not full. There's always room for a little bit of bite. But what if there's just a battle of wills? They really don't want to try it. Sometimes you got to let your toddler win. Remember, we talked about this in Teddy's tips? Sometimes you got to let them win. But winning the battle and not necessarily the war. So now you take that item that they are just so strong in their convictions that they don't want to try, and you wrap that item up in a container, save it in the refrigerator. And the next time everybody's together eating, bring out that meal for everybody. Place the toddler in the normal assigned seat where they usually sit. And then whatever the meal or snack of the moment is, trade it for the previous rejected item in the fridge and say you need to eat one bite of this first. Right? So they're going to eat one bite of this first before they have the regular meal that everybody else is eating. And you stick to your word. But if not, there's another meal coming around. The last point for getting some good food in your toddler for breakfast is enlisting their help. Enlisting their help. It's all about skin in the game. If you guys have read Nassim Nicholas Taleb's book, Skin in the Game, it's a very good book. I would recommend it. Maybe we might even do it for this channel. You want your toddler to care about what is happening, though. You want your toddler to take pride in the participation. So have them help you out as much as they can. Maybe it's like cleaning the dishes, or maybe it's, getting out the cereal and milk if they can reach it and if it's safe to do so. But In the beginning, it's going to take longer because your kids don't know where it's at. They don't know how to wash the dishes. You're going to have to teach them, show them certain things. But have patience in the long term. Ted says you're going to potentially reap a lot of benefits from this. Right? In the long term, it will save you time, but it might take time to get there. But stay with it. Your kids are going to like helping if you give them some sort of skin in the game, some sort of, again, I guess I've used this word a lot this episode, but incentive to help out in this whole extravaganza. View the meal as an accomplishment too. Again, reward that performance. Celebrate with your kids. I think that'll make them happy, and I think it'll make them a returning customer. I believe that was the last slide. Yes, that was the last slide, guys. Thank you so much for listening this far. I really, really appreciate it. Next week, we're just going to continue on with Chapter 3 of this Getting Through the Day. We're going to have a JavaScript video out soon, too, for Chapter 3. And then big things coming up on the horizon, everybody. I'll have a blog companion to this channel. Very excited about that. I'm trying to figure out how I exactly want to do it, but I'll make sure to link in future videos about that. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening, subscribing. Let me know if you have any questions, comments down in the comments section. Please share this video, like, subscribe. And my name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care.